Sujewa, we just rolled our clocks back, which is appropriate because we're traveling back in time to 1981 to discuss Casey Makes a Mixtape, the latest film from Blake Calhoun. Takes place in Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas, and centers on Casey, a 13-year-old girl who is obsessed with making the perfect summer mixtape back in the days when you had to record things off of radio or vinyl, or I don't even know if they could do cassette to cassette at that point. She certainly didn't have that ability in this film, but she's got her perfect summer mix of songs down. Everything is all ready to go except for one song, and she's desperately hunting for it. It's a popular song on the radio, but as anyone who grew up in that era can attest, it's tricky to line up that perfect slot where you can press record at the right time, get the song on the radio, and then add it to your mixtape. She's also dealing with a broken family, spending the summer with her grandparents that she's kind of estranged from, and just meeting neighborhood kids and trying to get along and figure herself out in this whole crazy mixed up world of 1980s Texas. So yeah, the film is just now out, is in the last couple of weeks on demand. It's not doing any kind of a theatrical run. It's exclusively digital right now. You had a great interview with the writer-director, Blake Calhoun, which is up on your channel.
Why it's not doing theatrical later.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of information in that discussion, which I'll link down below. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to do a review of Casey Makes a Mixtape. But before that, because this is IndieSeen, A, how you doing, Sujewa? And B, what's going on in the world of your filmmaking?
Doing well. I'm dressed up as I appeared when at 13 years of age, which is, cool t-shirt, the beard, the hat, Brooklyn apartment, looking like a middle-aged indie filmmaker. That's how I looked at 13. So this is my 13-year-old costume for the show. Yeah, things are good. Wrapping up. I'm doing the last 2 weeks of prep before we start filming the final scenes. Writing, fundraising, set design, getting things organized, finding little spaceship models to film, and mostly working on the dialogue for the movie. Goal is to get it shot, all the remaining scenes shot this month, and then get it edited, and then try to have a sneak preview on December 12th. But by early December, if things are not looking good, I'll for that date, I'm going to move it. So I'm not crazy about. I'm not going to, go out of the way to, shorten the qualities of the film in order to meet the deadline. The deadline's there just to propel me to, wrap it up.
Well, that's good. And
so yeah, by March it'll be out, wide VOD. Oh, and one of the things I want to talk about filmmaking. Yeah, this show might be boring for teenagers, but for indie filmmaker types, it might be interesting. I like what Blake is doing with his movie, wide VOD, meaning available on all the major VOD platforms. And I'm going to do that with the 53 Spaceships movie.
Excellent. Yeah, I got to say, like that interview that you did with him, I'm going to probably come back to that a couple of times during this show.
Link below.
Yes, but people should definitely check it out. It's a lean, mean 30 minutes, and really getting into what it takes to get a movie out there in this day and age, especially in contrast with how it was, 30 years ago, 10 years ago. It's, talking about just the distribution deal. And I don't think you guys purposely did this, but the structure of the conversation with regarding the offers that he had for distribution and him turning those down, you're like, wait a second, why would you do that? Mm-hmm. And then in the ensuing 5 minutes, you find out at the end of that, wow, I would have turned that down too, which sounds unbelievable, but it's a great dramatic structure for an informal podcast. So congratulations.
Awesome. Yeah. Even 6 years ago, things were different in 2019.
Yeah.
And the deals that filmmakers are getting for distribution are not great right now.
And as you guys kind of laid out, you explain why, it's one of those things where it makes sense and you kind of know it if you think about it, but the two of you really put word to what's going on in the landscape and why a streamer like Netflix or Amazon would not be so keen to buy an independent film necessarily, whereas you see that kind of stuff on there all the time. Well, the answer, kind of a spoiler for your conversation, is they have their own production kind of deals and they're doing in-house movies. So it's like, why buy your stuff when we've got our stuff for essentially, well, not free, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, they can control it better. They can have the kind of content they want. Yeah, Netflix movies are not great. I mean, a lot of the Netflix made for Netflix movies I haven't really been happy with. I think they have their own standards, not just regular filmmaking, but people watch this much at this point and this much at this point. So I think that affects how their shows are structured, what's shown first, et cetera, et cetera.
And that's very interesting. I mean, this could go on an entire tangent with this discussion. We might have to come back to it later, but you bring up an excellent point because there have been all those stories about the algorithm they use to check when people watch, when they pause, when they exit a show completely. So that kind of bleeds into what they advocate for in terms of like story structure, event beats and that kind of stuff. There was a story, I think, earlier this year encouraging writers of these movies to spell out in dialogue exactly what is happening on the screen, because so many people will have Netflix on in the background while they're washing dishes or doing laundry or something. So they don't want anybody to miss anything. So you no longer have to look at the screen to tell what's going on, which is just wild. But
one exception, I think, is Noah Baumbach. I think his Netflix movies play like his regular movies. So he probably said, I'm not going to do any of that. Here's the movie.
And I was just going to say, I think the exception to a lot of what I just talked about is the sort of celebrity filmmakers.
Yeah,
Baumbach. We were talking before we went on. You've got Richard Linklater's Nouvelle Vague, which is coming out, and also Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Those feel more like we want this prestige here. Netflix is also big into the award season thing. So there's a difference between, I think, the run-of-the-mill Netflix movie/TV series and the kind of prestige filmmakers that they want to push, like, hey, these guys are in our stable now.
Right.
So you're not going to tell Guillermo del Toro, hey, you got to spell everything out for the audience. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I would never listen to anything. I mean, it depends on how much money they're paying, but even then it's going to be very difficult to do something crazy like spell everything out, because that kills, a lot of subtle and realistic and other creative aspects that need to stay in dialogue-driven movies.
Yeah, I mean that's a situation where you take the 20 million from Netflix to make a movie their way, and then use that to fund the next 30 years of your own filmmaking.
Yeah, in a movie like that, I would have one character constantly say, "How come everyone's saying all the subtext to me today? Why are people talking to me in a non-artful way? Am I in some kind of a streaming movie?"
There you go. That's the plot of your Netflix movie. It'll be Streamingception.
That's right.
All right. So tell me about. I want to get a little backstory on this. How did you come to connect with Casey Makes a Mixtape? How did you find? Did you know Blake Calhoun beforehand, or did you just hear about it, or what?
I knew Blake from the internet and just him being an indie filmmaker. He did a movie called Spoiled Milk. I think
it's Spilt Milk. Yeah.
What is it? Spilled.
I think it's Spilt Milk. Yeah.
Okay, something like that. Something with bad milk. I saw it a while back. It's like a heist type or a robbery type situation gone wrong, comedy drama set in a grocery store, and I saw it. I don't know where I saw it. I think I rented it somewhere. And but I've known about him from social media and the internet and the blogs. He's made a number of movies, including a TV show or a TV movie or web movie called Continuum that had a spaceship in it, a spaceship build. A spaceship build was part of the show. So I've known about him, and this movie was coming out, and I told him, send me a screener. If I dig it, I can promote it. If I don't dig it, we'll hang out some other time. So he sent me a screener, and I liked the movie. I gave it a 7 out of 10. Some things I didn't like, and many things I like. There are many things that I like about the movie. And then after that, I signed up to help promote it because he's self-releasing it, and that is a ton of work.
Yeah. And you are the king of self-promotion. That's not a knock against you. You do.
The king of promo, because what the mistake that a lot of filmmakers make is they separate studio promotion versus promotion that they do themselves, right? So and they kind of lower the self promotion as to another category, as a lower category of work. But really, the studio promo is just self promo on a much larger scale. You know,
Hmm.
the studios own the movies; they're putting out the movies. So it is similar to what indie filmmakers who own their movie when they promote. It's the same thing, but on a much smaller scale.
Yeah. Well, I just meant that when it comes to your own work, you're out there, every day, pounding the virtual pavement, getting the word out through, X posts and blogs and video interviews and that kind of stuff. So I could imagine you'd be very helpful when it comes to, helping a colleague friend get the word about their film.
Oh, good.
So
Thank
yeah.
you. Yeah, yeah, it's essential. I like people ask me how much money do your films make. I'm like, that's not the right question. The right question is I made 10 or 11 movies, so I was able to make a movie, fundraise, make another movie, and keep things going. So who knows how much money those movies have made. At some point I'll do a career, like a Hong Sang-soo career, uh, box office of like a few $100,000. But but the key thing for indie filmmakers as artists is to be able to make another movie. And if you can do that, then your projects are somewhat of a success.
Yeah. Um, all right. Well, so Casey makes a mixtape.
Yeah.
I'm curious because it's because you were at a 7 out of 10. I'd probably be a bit lower. And it's that I like parts of the film,
Hmm.
but overall I found it to be very frustrating because there kept being these little seeds of ideas like, okay, oh, this is what the movie's going to be about. No? Oh, okay. I guess this is what the movie's going to be about. Oh, really? No? Okay. Maybe this. Oh, this is where it's no. No. It just kept feeling like there are all these stops and starts.
Hmm.
I get really invested in, oh, this is going to be great, and then it just kind of gets dropped. And then by the end, I thought maybe this would have been better as a web series because there's so many ideas floating around but there's not really a through line that kind of is satisfactory to me. But that's also just personal taste. I'm curious, what was your 7 out of 10? Like, can you talk about what you didn't enjoy as much about the rest of it?
Yeah, I had the same problem, and I talked to Blake, the filmmaker, about it, and he has his way of talking about the issue, and we can go into a little bit. Um, I thought the movie, you know how the problem that some people have with Hong Sang-soo movies, there isn't a strong plot, right?
Right.
But those movies are not shot in a way that or edited in shot and edited in a way that indicates there will be a strong plot, right? But Casey,
Correct. I want to pull over real quick because I think that's a very important point that you're making, possibly inadvertently or advertently. The form of the film.
that's a good point. It's on purpose.
Okay. See, this is why you're the king. But no, the form of a film, or anyway, the kind of the expectation that is set up from the beginning as like this is almost it's almost an intangible. But when you sit down and you're like the movie starts, you're pulled into okay, this is what kind of movie this is going to be. Hong Sang-soo is in a category all by himself. We talked about lots of his movies. I'm not the biggest fan, but I am a reluctant admirer for the same reason that you went over. Like he continues making movies and that's his life's calling.
Mhm.
And, who am I to judge? Well, I'm a film critic, but he's still out there doing his thing. With Casey Makes a Mixtape, this shouldn't have the same kind of lack of structure or fluidity in the same way that a Hong Sang-soo movie does, because this does not feel like a hang out, relax, see where it goes. It
Mhm.
feels like there should be a strong story in place. And maybe that's because it follows in a long lineage of coming of age, sort of, teen, preteen dramedies, as he would call it.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a weird movie to watch. So
Mhm.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I caught you
Yeah,
off.
yeah, yeah. No problem. We can interrupt each other as good ideas pop up. Um, yeah, I thought the structure, the thing that you're talking about, the form of the movie feels like it should have a regular plot. Casey goes to the grandparents' house, and then some craziness comes up, some challenge, something that has to be solved during the course of the movie. And while that's happening, these other slice of life interesting details happen. Right, then we get to the end of the movie. So, and there's a 9 out of 10 film threat review, that's a really high score, and that's amazing for the movie. It says the same thing. So I said in my review, and the film threat reviewer said the same thing, that it feels like an observational movie plot-wise, right? Uh, imagine if Hong Sang-soo did this, and for a Hong Sang-soo movie, for a shot and edited like this would be a rather eventful movie, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the way that this movie is put together, which is like a mainstream American, um, somewhat indie, but maybe like 1980s mainstream type movie, you expect there to be a bigger plot. Now, Blake, that I've talked to him about this several times, he says that the things happening in the movie are a big deal from Casey's perspective, the little things, the little challenges that she has, right? But as audience members, we need something else. So that's what took me from giving it an 8 or higher. Uh, Instead of like 3.5 stars out of 5, I went with like 3 stars, which is 7 out of 10. That's how it translates in my head. So the plot is not great in a traditional movie sense for an American mainstream movie type form that this movie has. So that's where it lost some of the score for me. On the plus side, an indie filmmaker doing a period movie and doing it well, that's great. So that's amazing. This was a micro budget movie, not in the close to a million, but close to 100,000 or less. And so he did it really, he did really clever filmmaking to hide the budget constraints.
Well, and also, again, sorry to interrupt, but on that point, you said this is close to $100,000 movie. I
less
mean,
or less.
okay, and you guys talked a lot about what you can do on an iPhone. I know he did an iPhone test for a short film that kind of became the seed for this film, but I don't know if he actually shot this on an iPhone or if he used quote unquote real cameras.
He
But
used
whatever
a camera,
hmm?
and he used a red camera for most of the shots. He also
Oh, he used
used
red. Okay.
yeah, and he also used an iPhone for some of the shots.
Okay, because it looks great. I mean, this does not look like, if you describe, oh, it's $100,000 movie, to some people like, wow, that's $100,000. That's a lot. When you're talking about independent film, that could be a lot, or it could be, I don't know if I want
Yeah,
to watch that.
yeah, yeah.
Because even
And to do a period piece for a micro budget. I don't know the exact budget, and some of the cost of the movie includes licensing the music, which
oh
can.
yeah,
But from what I know, it's a micro budget movie. Production end, probably under 100,000, and I didn't go into details because it's not super important for the audience. But um, a Hollywood movie doing this would be just the normal. But an indie filmmaker doing this is amazing.
right. And I think that's one of the selling points of the film. And it's not like there's a booklet or a post-it note on the poster saying like, hey, this was a cool period piece and they made it for like barely any money. Isn't that impressive? But it is impressive,
Oh,
knowing that. And to your point about the economy of the shots, like when they have, I would guess that he probably called in some favors. Maybe someone had some old cars or that old camper, or maybe he had some of the old tech from when he was a kid, because he
yeah, he
was
went to
a
his
teen.
mom's. I think a lot of the stuff was shot at his mom's.
Right, and it did look like a very kind of lived in uh 1980s world. So it's got that authenticity to it. But yeah, it did have that feel largely, except I will say, and this is something I've got a few nitpicks, and some of those nitpicks added up to me taking notches off of my score, which might seem unfair to some people, but that's just the way that I watch movies. If
Right.
I'm immersed in something, I'm like swept away. If I'm not, it's because something is breaking immersion, and I'm like, well, I've seen this done better, or this could have been done better. And that's, that's what we do as film critics.
Mhm.
But the t-shirts, all of the t-shirts look brand new, like they were just off the rack of a store from a mall today. Like none of them looked like these kids. They looked like they'd all just been purchased by these teenagers. Every single time there's a shirt or shorts or the tube socks, like nothing looked like they'd worn it more than, once. Everything has kind of got this shiny patina to it. Now, maybe that's a meta nostalgic concept. I don't know. But another thing was, the performances were good. The lady who played the grandmother, though, I noticed that her accent kept changing from she's the elderly Texas grandma to having a sort of indistinguishable Midwestern non-accent from almost scene to scene.
Maybe there's a backstory and she's hiding out.
That would be something. That would be another plot thread that they could explore in that movie. But no, and also, this takes place in Texas, as we mentioned, but aside from the grandfather and occasionally the grandmother and also the mother of one of the friends, no one else has any kind of a Texan accent. Now, I'm not it's just, I would expect there to be more of a feeling of a culture and a time and a place. And Casey, I know she originally came from California with her mother, but she had some detours in another part of Texas, which added to the geographical confusion of what the hell is going on with this family. But I'll put that beside the point. It's kind of like if you set a movie in Paris and everyone talks like they're from Chicago, like what's going on here? I was pulled out of the movie. Yeah, I don't know.
He probably used all local people. So I think those are actual. I mean, it could be that we're just not used to what real Texas people sound like. We might be familiar with the cliche.
I'm not talking about like, hey there, partner, how you doing? But there are enough examples of people who talk with an accent that I would expect to hear from people living in Texas who are not transplants. I mean, Casey, from what we know, or what we've been told, is the one who has kind of moved there from somewhere else. But the locals, I mean, you look at any other movie that is like Texas based, you look at half the stuff Linklater has ever done before he decided to go full Parisian with the vlog.
The Slacker, we have lots of Texas people in Texas talking, but that was set on a college campus. So the accent didn't bother me. I thought it was relatively authentic, but some filmmaking things could have been done. Like if this was not shot and edited like a mainstream 1980s movie, and it was more of like an observational Jarmusch, Hong Sang-soo type, and with more of a filmic look, right? The modern look is a video / filmic look that's in this movie. But it was like if it was mostly like green, right? And then camera doesn't move much. We have the music, and if the plot is not going to give us some big changes or challenges, we could have had narration where she's thinking about big problems, and towards the end there's some kind of a resolution that comes from the small interactions she has, small and adult perspective, small interactions that she has throughout the summer. So there is a disconnect between the type of plot and the form of the movie, and that's what we're picking up on.
Well, there's you mentioned narration. There is a fourth wall breaking technique that Casey uses to address the audience that feels like it was kind of in the spirit of Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I think so.
The problem, and this is a filmmaking issue. The first time we see that plot employed is, I think, right after the opening credits. I mean, she's, trying to get the mixtape together, and she addresses the audience. But my memory of it is she's kind of looking down at us, almost like she's sitting on her bed talking to the camera. The issue is it plays too much like a vlog or a modern video confessional instead of just like looking up at the audience. It looks like she's talking into her phone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, wait a second, this just said 1981 Texas. How am I watching this?
Yeah, he could have done a thing where she makes tapes of her talking, of herself talking. I don't know if a lot of people did that. I know Woody Allen does it in Manhattan. I don't know if kids did it in 1980, but
well, they wouldn't. She wouldn't have had access to that kind of equipment, and you know, she comes from modest means. It's video recording equipment was quite expensive.
not video, audio recording, making tapes.
Oh, an audio. I got it. Yeah.
Like she's into making music tapes, but maybe she keeps audio diary or something.
I just, you just came up with another subplot. She makes these tapes. She gives a mixtape to her friend, but she gives her the wrong tape, and she gives her the confessional tape, and then a big secret gets out or something. And
that's right.
Yeah. But no, there's.
So I think we agree the plot for a mainstream form movie is underdeveloped or not done in a way that appeals. That satisfies adults, but maybe there's been lots of good audience reactions, and there's been like 10 plus reviews, and most of them positive to various degrees. So there are people who dig the movie, but yeah, the main problem I had was there wasn't a big enough plot for this kind of a movie, and if we're going to go with no plot or low plot, then we need to present the movie in a different way, like some Hong Sang-soo movies, or even Slacker. It's very observational. We're just watching people do things. We're not expecting, big challenges or a big plot twist. It's not Star Wars.
Well, and I also don't want to necessarily advocate like, oh, I want this movie to follow Hollywood conventions or
Right.
structures, but there is a reason that a lot of those structures and those techniques work in terms of helping the audience get on board with the movie. The other issue that I had, and it's kind of related to this and also related to the pressed shirts comment that I had earlier. Casey, the actress, and I've got her name right here. She's very good. Presley Richardson.
Yeah, very good actress.
She and the other two child actors are good, but they have this feeling of being modern child actors acting in a modern child way.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking back to it's particularly off-putting when we first meet Casey and she's meeting the kids in the neighborhood, and she has this perpetual like Gen Z stink face about everything. It's like, whereas my recollection of kids back in the early 80s, of which I was one, and also the way that the sullen kind of outsiders were portrayed in media was not that kind of like upturned nose, crinkly, like sarcastic thing. It was more sullen and outcast. There was just something very modern about these portrayals, and also something kind of Disney Channel about them. Very broad. And I can say that as an expert because my youngest has been getting into like 2000s era Disney Channel shows like sitcoms, and I'm watching them, and I'm watching this movie thinking, yes, that broad take from that young actor is very much how a Disney Channel kid would exit the room or react in embarrassment. It's like, kind of a thing. It just, you think about the classic coming of age childhood movies that we all, or not all, but a lot that are very popular. And you think about the naturalism that comes across, the relatability of those characters and actors, like, oh, I hung out with that kid. I knew that kid. I didn't have that feeling with anybody in this film except maybe Casey towards the middle and the end, where for some reason she kind of drops all these defenses and becomes more agreeable. But again, because we don't have these fulfillment of these mini adventures that she's going on, it just seems kind of like a drastic change. Like, oh, she's nice now.
Yeah, if it was shot more like a documentary from the 1980s or so, or an indie film like like the 400 Blows, which is that's a classic about childhood. Yeah,
or even Childhood, another Linklater film.
We wouldn't have if the form was not polished mainstream movie TV storytelling, we wouldn't have these objections. But cinematography is great. The acting is pretty good throughout, and the movie plays to me like a not in form a documentary, but in just the cataloging of some things that happens to a 13-year-old one summer in Texas, and that's interesting. There's some interesting stuff in there, but yeah, the plot was the lack of a major plot was the main problem I had with it, but yeah, I mean the movie could be interesting for some people.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I hate to say this as kind of as a cautionary tale, but an example of a movie to watch if you're considering making not but basically any kind of film
Right.
to watch and pick up on what we're kind of talking about with these kind of stop start narrative blocks that don't result in a through line. And does your script have these same kind of issues? And if you're making a period movie, are your performers, your dialogue, all that stuff, is that authentic enough to the period, or at least what people, if they weren't alive then, who have watched maybe movies from that period or about that period done better and more authentically, how does yours stack up? I understand it's an independent film. It was shot in 2 weeks, and you guys kind of talked about this in your interview. Fairly or not, this film is going to be judged against Hollywood movies
Right.
because it is on a streaming service. If you type in to Apple TV Plus or whatever, coming of age movies, you're going to come up with Casey Makes a Mixtape along with Stand By Me and
Mhm,
16 Candles
mhm.
and, a whole bunch of other things. And if you're not ready to have yours be in that pantheon, I'm not saying you have to change everything, but just be aware that people are going to be comparing this to them. And this might not be, people might enjoy it, but I don't know if they're going to remember it and come back to it.
Right. I think when we first started, Blake and I talking about how to present the movie, his idea was one of his ideas was that this is a commercial movie. But I said it's not really a commercial movie because it's more of a, if you present it more of it as an indie movie, period piece experiment, then people have different expectations, and if you present it as a commercial coming of age movie, then they have very different expectations. So you need to, I think, sort of underplay what you're offering so that people are become happy with it.
Yeah. Um, the one thing that was
The movie is widely
odd,
available like a commercial movie. It doesn't have a 10 million, $20 million promotional budget, so it's not getting sort of a commercial awareness. But yeah, it is widely available on Apple TV, YouTube Movies, Amazon. So yeah, some people will go into it thinking, oh, this is this the from the presentation, from the marketing, from availability, this seems like a mainstream a movie about some teenagers in the 1980s, but the form, as we're talking about, is more indie observational.
yeah, and it sounds strange to lob this as a criticism, but the marketing materials anywhere are almost too good.
Hmm.
I mean, because if you look at the thumbnail on Apple TV Plus, the logo design, like everything is really high quality and impressive. So it looks like
Yeah,
it could have been an Apple movie, right?
yeah, it says commercial. It says some Casey's gonna have some wild adventures in this movie.
And I got to say, there was the one by the end of the film. Again, I'm thinking back to what if I had written this movie.
Right.
There's a subplot, and I hate to call it that because it doesn't actually go anywhere, involving her attempt to get a job at a record store. And I
Hmm.
don't want to get into it because I want people to discover it, but there's sort of a relationship with the assistant manager at the store, which I thought could have tied in very nicely with the song that she is trying to hunt down on the radio,
Right. Right.
which I won't spoil that either, but it's a famous police song.
Hmm.
And Casey has the lyrics explained to her at the end, which if they had tied more of that together, I think could have been, somewhat interesting.
Yeah.
There's also,
Go ahead.
sorry, oh, jinx. But no, there's also toward the beginning of the film, when she's going into the neighborhood, there's a pool party, and that's when she meets, was it? Sorry. Carrie, played by Kennedy Celeste, who I think this is her first film, does very well. But there's almost this idea that there's another boy in the neighborhood named Craig who has a crush on Casey, but she doesn't seem that interested in him. And then all of a sudden at this pool party, Casey eyes Carrie. Like, oh, maybe there's going to be something there. It's going to be a different kind of coming of age movie,
Right.
but that doesn't even go anywhere. It's like what are you doing to me, movie? But yeah,
Blake shot this himself, and he wrote the script. So I think if we had a different cinematographer who would have insisted we need to present this a certain way for this to work, because the script is so thin, right? The plot wise, there's not much happening. Um, and if there was another editor who could have said, yeah, we need to edit this a certain way so that we highlight this is an observational indie movie, and then yeah, so and script wise, cinematography wise, editing wise, things could be different for this movie to, and also like you said, the marketing has to reflect that this is more of an indie movie. Not much will happen, but there's some, it's captured in an interesting way, and the production design is interesting, and the characters are interesting, and the filmmaking is pretty good. So yeah, a lot of things could be different, but from what we have, for fans of the actors, this movie could work. For
Mhm.
for people who want to see what can be done on a micro budget in 2025, indie filmmaking, period filmmaking wise, this is a great example. I was very impressed by that. I think that might have been one of the best aspects of the movie. How to do a 1980s period piece on a micro budget and have it come out authentic, the environment come out authentic.
Yeah. Two things I want to mention. One, this is strictly, no one is going to know about this or
Right.
care about this when I say it, but I had to mention it because it was one of the few eyebrow raising moments for me. There's an actor, Casey's father, is in jail, and he shows up in the film towards the end of the film. That's all I'm going to say. He's played by an actor named Brandon Potter, who's done other things. I think he's done some voiceover work and smaller things. But what I know him from, and if anybody has worked in a corporate job in the last probably 5 years, you might know him from a show called The Inside Man, which is corporate training videos cut up into these like little 5-10 minute micro episodes that's sort of like 24 in the world of corporate IT. And he plays a villain who eventually kind of comes around to the side of the good guys and helps become a good hacker. But I couldn't believe it. I was amazed. And one of the biggest regrets of losing my previous job is I no longer have access to The Inside Man. So that whole soap opera of shenanigans in the tech world is left dangling for me. But hey, I got to see an actor I really like from that series in this movie. I was completely floored. The other thing I want to mention is there is a graphic novel. I plan to bring it up and hold it up, but you just go look it up. It's called Grommets, which was done by Rick Remender and Brian Posehn, and it came out, it was, I think, late last year and finished up earlier or mid this year. It is also a coming-of-age story set in California in the early 1980s. And that is, it's a 7-issue series. It's been collected into a trade paperback. There really is a graphic novel because it's one story. But that is kind of the gold standard for me of what it means to, be a coming of age kid in kind of a pseudo skateboarding culture with, the neighborhoods and times changing and growing up and what all that means. Even though it's a comic book, it's different from this film. But one of the things that kind of captured for me is I wasn't quite sure why Casey Makes a Mixtape was a movie or story that needed to be told. Why do I care about what happened in 1981 to this girl in this neighborhood? Reading Grommets, it has parallels to the disposable culture that we have today. Its roots in California in the 1980s. There's a whole, it's not even a subplot. It's just sort of like iconography of what Taco Bell used to look like before it was a nationwide franchise. They had these big, beautiful restaurants that looked like Mexican, a restaurant in a Mexican village. Now they all look like McDonald's, these kind of cold corporate slabs. But just the idea that this culture that we take for granted now came from somewhere and was sort of diluted over time, and that integrates with the idea of youthful dreams and hopes and ambitions sort of getting eroded as you get into adulthood and take on more responsibility, and the kind of the color drains out of life. I'm recommending people read grommets and also watch Casey Makes a Mixtape, sort of as a contrast, because again, I'm watching this film not only looking for a through line, but also like, what is this movie trying to say? Why this story? I understand it's kind of a nostalgic period for Blake Calhoun, but I still don't quite connect with his connection to that era.
Yeah, as an indie filmmaker and film fan, I watch movies for all kinds of reasons. Um, well, the cinematography in some of the shots may be appropriate, maybe not appropriate for this project, but on their own reminded me of some like 1980s Spielberg cinematography in like Close Encounters. Like there's a shot with a kid, a male kid, and a TV
Craig.
background, and the way it's framed and the way the post work is done. It could have been pulled out of a Spielberg movie. So there are many aspects of this project that I like. It overall didn't come together in a total way. I think this has to do with tonal control overall throughout the project that filmmakers get better at as they make more movies. I was thinking of if and Blake is a fan of Linklater also. If Linklater had done this, how would he have done this, and what kind of plot changes maybe he would have put in. So I think it's just he could have done the same story but presented things in a different way, both cinematography wise and editing wise, and maybe take out the directed rest of the camera. And if we want to make a big deal of some of the stuff happening in Casey's life, maybe her writing notes and having a narration, or making a mixtape, or making a tape of her talking about her problems, like the subplot that we just came up with. Yeah, something like that could have worked. I think we needed to see more, either more inner world changes or some sort of more of an external, simple but big plot happening in this movie, because the movie has the pieces to be something very interesting and mainstream if it was done that way.
Yeah, and you're giving me an idea of something that I think could have worked well just as a narrative device. The process of making a mixtape. I mean, she does have some of these, what I'll call vlogs, these turns to the cameras, almost like not even Ferris Bueller, but almost like American Psycho, where Patrick Bateman would get on a jag about Phil Collins or Huey Lewis in the news. She talks about, headphones and what they do for the sound of the experience of listening to music and why it's important. If and we open the movie with almost this pump up the volume kind of montage of like getting the gear together and making the tape, and she's like doing the pencil thing to rewind the cassette tape. If that kind of fetishizing of the process of working with this technology had been worked into the story,
Mhm.
like what does the winding of the tape mean in terms of her relationship with her mother? What can you do with the headphone thing to integrate that into sort of a metaphorical plot with one of her friends, and kind of structure it that way, so that again, even if it doesn't relate to something today, which is what I kind of wonder whenever I'm watching a period piece, like why did this person make this movie today? What are they trying to say about today? As sort of a commentary by looking at the past, it would have at least given some kind of thematic cohesion to, it's all in the title, Casey Makes a Mixtape.
Right.
That journey gets so jumbled up and appearing and disappearing and reappearing throughout the film that it almost doesn't matter as a title.
Hmm. So I think, and I think I've mentioned this somewhere, in a post or in discussions. If you're making a drama, something pretty big has to happen, right?
Yeah.
Why is this summer important for this character? But if nothing big is happening, then there has to be some good comedy or some very interesting conversations happening.
Yeah, I mean there's a little bit of that what I'll call the Stranger Things problem with this nostalgia, filmmaking. The grandmother's playing with a Rubik's cube. There's a scrambled porn joke. There's all this stuff that like was done 20 years ago when they were talking about the 1980s from a nostalgic lens. Like, yeah, people had Rubik's cubes. Yeah, they dealt with, scrambled videotapes and all this other stuff. Why present that now? Because it's a cliche. What can you add to it? Or is there some other kind of untapped thing that everybody in the 80s experienced, but no one has brought up in a movie before?
Mhm.
I would probably have to dig back to think of something like that, but I'm sure it exists. Like
Yeah,
create a new cliche.
yeah. So what I'm doing with my script for 53 spaceships, and usually what I do with my movies is I spend a lot of time on the script, so that even if everything else fails, there's some interesting dialogue and stories happening that people can latch onto it. One thing that I'm looking at is, you know how in sci-fi, and I don't think anyone's really done this to the degree that I'm going to do in my movie. You know how in sci-fi movie there's like, you know, 1 minute scene. There's like five amazing technology things or plot points that are used to set up, two characters falling in love or two characters having a fight and one winning, one losing. So I'm about, whoa, what about this time travel device? How does that work? What is the Civil War that they're referring to? How does that work? How does that gigantic crawling ship in the desert work, right? So my characters will be pausing and looking at a lot of these things that we just gloss over in sci-fi movies, and we say, yeah, we don't have the time to look into it because the plot is about we gotta liberate the princess, we gotta save the princess. It's not about how many people died coming up with this transportation technology. So one thing I'm doing is unpacking and questioning all the amazing and wild and crazy tech and stories that are just there underdeveloped as backstory in sci-fi movies. So something like that could have been done, could be done in the future with any period, any period piece. Now, one thing that I think could have added comedy and drama and interesting perspectives to this movie is if modern day Casey is remembering, to some degree, this summer that it seemed ordinary, maybe challenging to her at 13, but now she realizes certain things, and now she has a lot of questions about it. Why did I do that? Why were people doing this crazy thing? Blah blah blah.
Right, and that's sort of the almost the Stand By Me bookend, which works very well. You got Richard Dreyfuss at the beginning and the end of that movie, and by the end, you've gone through this nostalgic journey, and it's a true bookend in that film because he shows up at the beginning and the end. He doesn't pop in like we're not flashing forward to the future. It's all staying with those four friends. And at the end, there's a reason that he is looking back and telling the story, and we find out about it, and it involves one of his best friends from childhood. It's a shocking, sad moment that ends in sort of a buttery, happy, wistful, nostalgic ending that is completely satisfying. So I think there could be something there with this, and I like that. I don't know what the life event would be that would cause Casey to look back on this period in time, but even if it's a cliche, as we mentioned, sometimes cliches work if they're done well. So I really like that idea.
Yeah, I mean, the situation could have been, and this is the kind of thing we can do in a podcast. We could just talk about various, alternative universes that may never exist. The summer could have gone bad. It could have been a comedy about a horrible summer, and but the one thing that kept her going was making of the mixtapes. And now in 2025, she's winning some award for being a museum director or writer or someone who knows, who does work in recording and remembering the past in such a brilliant way that they asked her at an interview about something that happened. How did you get on this path? Then she tells us through the movie something she doesn't tell the public about some stuff that happened that she's keeping to herself, but were nevertheless important. But yeah, so we needed a more of a high stakes plot to make this work as a mainstream movie. But Blake shows amazing. I mean, he's a middle-aged filmmaker, but he shows amazing potential in the filmmaking, putting this all together, getting it out as a in a polished way. So he should keep at it. And in the like I think I posted, if the next movie is like a crime period piece, he can do it well as long as there's a good script. He's got the creation of the past, bringing it into the present aspect down on an indie budget.
Very much so. I mean, I like what he did here as a filmmaker, from establishing the aesthetic to, I mean, shooting it himself. I mean, there's a lot to admire here. But something that you just said about kind of the in for why we're telling this story, it reminds me of a conversation I had with my son, who's 8 years old. We were talking about phones and how they used to be corded and attached to the wall in your kitchen. And looking at your phone meant just looking down at a keypad. And I couldn't even explain to him what a rotary phone was. That would have just like melted his brain. But just the idea of looking back on what technology used to be and how hard we used to have to work for something that now we can create a playlist on YouTube using millions and millions of videos to pull up whatever song we want and
Right.
personalize it within a matter of 2 minutes,
Mhm.
30 seconds if you use AI to do it. What does it mean to have to go back and spend entire days like slaving over something that is quote unquote just a mixtape? But back then it meant everything. It was a real quest. Tying that all together to, again, what happens to her in adulthood? Is she striving for something? Is life too easy? Is her work meaning it doesn't mean anything to her the same way that making this mixtape did back when she was 13. Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps. There's so much here. I want to see. Blake, if you're watching this, I'm not saying you should remake your own movie. I'm just saying you're very good at presenting this nostalgia. I want to see another character, maybe it's 1981 in the town just over from this in Dallas Fort Worth. But yeah, go for it again. I'll be there for it.
Yeah. I mean, he's made a bunch of movies. He's made a few. I think he's made 5 or 6, and I'm sure
But
he'll
yeah,
make more.
not genre stuff. I want to see this kind of heartfelt teen dramedy because I know you've got it in you. I'm still
There
addressing
we
you,
go.
Blake.
With a more high stakes plot and or a different way of presenting if it's a low tech or sort of a low scale movie as far
Yeah.
as events happening. One fun thing that we could do in a future movie set in the 1980s, have a weird kid who is using the phone, the 1980s phones, the way we use 2025 phones, right? Talking into it, trying to do searches, all that stuff, and everyone else is like, "What are you doing?" And that kid ends up being like, the Apple guy. What was his name?
Either Wozniak or Jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, that kid ends up being like a Jobs who completely reinvents the phone because he hated the limitations of the 1980s phones that couldn't do everything that the 2025 phones can do.
We are writing this right now, Sujewa, because I can see the opening scene is like kids at a sleepover. They're going out to get pizza, and before they leave, the one weird kid takes a pair of house scissors and snips the phone cord off the wall and just shoves it in his pocket,
That's
and they
right.
go out. And it's like, what are you doing? You'll understand someday.
There you go. So your rating might be 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I would say 6, possibly 5, between 5 and 6. I know it's kind of wishy-washy, but
Okay.
yeah, I feel like I admire the movie more than I enjoyed watching it, and I think that counts for something, but not as much as I had hoped.
Yeah, the my 7 out of 10, like I said, yeah, the movie has good cinematography. Movie has good acting. Needs a better script. And the recreating the 1980s is done. Early 1980s on an indie film budget is done really well. And if you approach it not the way that the film is, uh, you know, hinting that you approach it as a major event movie. If you approach it as an observational, light drama comedy about someone's, summer in 1980s, early 1980s, there's a lot to, check out and hang back and enjoy. the movie is just not presented that way. So yeah, if you can get out, I mean, so that's going to be difficult for people to get out of the framing of the movie and try to enjoy it as a Hong Sang-soo or early Jarmusch or early Linklater type movie. And one movie that this did remind me of was Jarmusch's Patterson, where nothing much crazy happens, and we're just watching this guy's life.
I have yet to catch up with Patterson, which is surprising because I love Jarmusch and I'm a big fan of Adam Driver. So yeah, I gotta check that out. The last thing I'll say, I keep thinking about this clothing issue and how everything looked too off the rack.
So you wanted things to be lived in.
Easy way to fix this. From a wardrobe perspective, take all your clothes that you're going to put on these characters, at least the kids who are running around all summer, getting into adventures, allegedly, run them through the wash twice. Just give them that kind of faded, somewhat distressed look. You don't have to actually distress them, but make it look like they've been worn for at least a week or two. Anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it. So, Sujewa, anything we talked about your projects? 53 Spaceships is going to be out. You're planning in March next year, but you're working towards a screening in December. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
53 Spaceships is happening, and the follow-up movies, I'm getting ideas together. Yeah, I think 53 Spaceships can't talk. It's going to be a different kind of movie from me. I think it's going to be a lot faster. It's going to feel more like Star Wars, not like Star Trek, more like Star Wars, 1977 Star Wars. Lot of action, running around looking for spaceships. Not crazy action, but shots of spaceships, lots of interesting ideas. So it's going to be like my last 4 movies, but more sped up. And I think it's going to be more mainstream accessible. Let's see. And so I've figured out a way to get all these movies done and out. And we're going to try to do sort of a mainstream, not mainstream, but wide VOD availability. We're going to try to do some theatrical screenings just to get everything up and running. So a lot of interesting stuff ahead with that movie and the following 52 movies, which is a crazy project, but let's try to do it.
No, try. You're just going to do it. I know you. You're going to get it done.
And all right. One thing about the costumes, I think Blake may have taken the let's just keep things clean path just for like continuity's sake and filmmaking sake. But you're right. They could be a little bit more worn out, and that could still work.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say he kept them nice so that he could return them to the store. So cut down on the budget.
But when his next movie comes out, we can talk to him.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, I think we're going to leave it there. Folks, thank you for hanging out and watching this.
But regardless of what we said, check out the movie. There's a lot of good things in it.
Yeah, you can rent it and buy it on, I think, all the major platforms, Apple TV, Amazon, wherever you stream movies, you can check it out there. There's not a physical media release yet, but watch Sujewa's interview with Blake, again, link down below, because they talk a bit about what the future might hold for that. And yeah, thank you for watching IndieSeen. Be sure and check down below also for all of Sujewa's links. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications and all that business. And I have a feeling that we're going to be back pretty darn soon with another exploration of a film by a filmmaker that we've name dropped several times on this episode. If you can figure that out, well, there's no prize, but it'll be fun.
And another Texas indie filmmaker.
Yes, let's stop there because I don't want to give it totally away. Although I think
soon. And also donate large amounts of money to Ian's film criticism projects so he can do more.
There you go. I appreciate that plug. Thank you, sir. But anyway, folks, we're going to leave it there. So until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much and take care. Hey everyone, Ian here. I know, long time no see. But if you like the video you just watched, feel free to subscribe to Kicking the Seat right here, and also check out the playlist and recommended video right here. Thanks for watching.